Does anyone remember when a bunch of terrorists blew up the Twin Towers? I know it was a long time ago, but we remember that happened, right? Whatever you think about how the war on terror that followed was conducted, I'm sure we all agree that the people who plotted to kill Americans that day deserved to die. Well, I asked the people who are upset this week about the Trump administration using the military to target the cartel, what's the difference? If anything, the cartel has been responsible for more dead Americans in the last 20 years than any war we fought in the Middle East. This doesn't trivialize how bad the problem of jihad is. All it does is showcase how dangerous foreign cartels are to the American people. I don't think we have to pick and choose which enemies to fight. I'm confident the U.S. military is big enough to walk and chew at the same time, and it doesn't matter to me whether it's shawarma or taco-flavored bad guys. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Hello, everybody. Okay, we have three topics we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about using the military to go after the cartel. We are going to talk about Bari Weiss, maybe the next head of news over at CBS, and author Malcolm Gladwell changes his mind about trans athletes. But first, before we get into that, my favorite comment from last week comes from @Louis Iseda, S5N, who said, quote, "You fool boy," end quote. Louis here was commenting on my video where I was advocating for deporting Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and he thinks I'm foolish. See, I get this because I see there's really two sides of this issue. See, on my side of the issue is I want to live in a country of rules and laws and upstanding citizens, and I don't necessarily want to live next door to the wife-beating, human trafficking, gang-affiliated criminals from El Salvador. And Louis, see, he thinks that that's okay. And I get how he arrives at that position because he's obviously not very bright, and he thinks that wife-beating, human trafficking, gang-affiliated criminals from El Salvador deserve to be here illegally, speak no English, and contribute nothing of value to society. And I don't. And you see, it's very easy to come up with either of those conclusions. The problem is, and the difference of opinion comes from, see, I'm rather bright, and I wind up on the side of law-abiding, respectable people who just want to live in a society free from criminality. And Lewis is not very bright. And see, that's why you wind up on the side of human trafficking, wife-beating, gang-affiliated criminals from El Salvador. And it's easy to see, which one is, which is so equal that it's easy to arrive at either of those conclusions. Thank you, Lewis, for your comments. I'll take them to heart and continue to leave comments. They really help in the algorithm boost these videos, so I appreciate you. Anyway, let's get on to topic one, the military versus the cartel. So I talked about this in the intro, and I've talked about it before, that we should be doing this. And I really mean it. I think that it is a good thing to use the U.S. military to combat the cartel. Because the cartel, we've used the military to combat the Taliban and the war on terror throughout the Middle East. Whatever you think of that, as I said in the intro, I don't really care. Whatever your opinion on Iraq and Afghanistan were, okay, that's fine. You can have them. You can disagree with me. That's fine. I am of the opinion, as many people know who watch this channel, that we should have a muscular foreign policy, meaning that we should flex American might where we need to. I think we should have stayed in Afghanistan for forever. That was my opinion. We never should have left. I know a lot of people don't like that war. I think we should have been there for another 50 years. It does, like the fact that we were there for 20 years, I don't care. We should have stayed there forever. And there are people who disagree with that, and that's fine. But that's where I stand. And we used American muscle to do some good things in the Middle East. Regardless of what people say, we killed a lot of bad guys who meant to harm Americans. I really do believe that. And the fact that Osama bin Laden is laying without his eyes at the bottom of an ocean attests to that fact. So I think that it's good. I think we should be doing the same thing with the cartel. The cartel they kill more Americans than just about any organization in the world. Upwards of 100,000 Americans a year die from drug overdoses. And I understand that it's hard to just one-to-one blame that on the cartel. But let me explain something to you about the drug trade in America. It used to be that drugs came over the southern border, and the drugs were pot, and the drugs were cocaine, and the drugs were heroin. And these things came over the southern border, and they were brought in by speedboat. They were brought in by little submarines that they were coming up the coast. They were brought across the southern border by mules and by people who were trying to come to America and had to pay their way by carrying narcotics. But they come from the southern border. They're not cultivated in the United States. Not all of them. Obviously, pot is a little different. But cocaine, heroin, these things are not cultivated in the United States. They are imported from our southern border. So that's always been the case. Look at Scarface. Scarface was made in the 80s. It was about the Scarface was made in the, when did Scarface come out? 90s? But it was about the 80s, right? It's about the late 70s, 80s, where that's the drug trade. The guys bring the stuff up from South America, Central America, and it comes through the southern border. And that's how it's always been historically. It's still that way today. The difference is that today, the drugs are different because now what comes across the southern border is fentanyl. And fentanyl is not produced in South America, Central America. Fentanyl is actually produced in China. China ships it to Central and Southern American cartels, and then the cartels smuggle the fentanyl across the border. They still do heroin. They still do cocaine. They're still, despite the fact of legalization in America, there's still a lot of our pot comes from across the southern border. So the drug trade hasn't changed. The difference is the deadliness of the drugs has. People used to overdose on heroin. It happens. Fentanyl overdoses are crazy how much of a difference it made. And I'll speak in my capacity here as a person who deals with this as a first responder or has dealt with it. It's gotten better in the last few years, but there was a time when you would run overdoses every single day of your life, multiple overdoses in a day, and you're talking about people who would die if you weren't there to give them Narcan. And I feel like my theory, this is a personal theory, I'll tell you this flat out. There is no bearing on this. There's no science on this whatsoever. My theory is that in the past 5 years, the reason why it's gotten better is because I think that the dealers have kind of figured out how to work fentanyl into their products adequately. So they're mixing it with their cocaine. They're mixing it with their heroin. They're doing these things. And I think at first they didn't know how to mix it, and you just were overdosing people left and right. And they've gotten better about it. You've seen a decrease in the number of overdose deaths. It's still outrageous. It's outrageous how many people. I think at the highs, I know at the highs, we lost over 100,000 people a year to overdoses. Think about that for a second. 100,000 people died in one single year from the cartel, bringing drugs across the southern border, cutting those drugs up, selling them to people in America who then distributed them to the American people. But the first step in the chain is the cartel. Technically, when we're talking about fentanyl, it's China. But the cartel is who we can fight right now. So should we be using the military to combat this organization? Yes. And so this week, the Trump administration did that. They've been promising that they were going to do it, and they did. I want to show a video here. Pull this thing up just a minute. Okay. So here is the video. Check this out. You see a boat. So black and white. This is clearly drone footage from the U.S. military, unclassified, it says at the top. But you see a boat full of people. It's in the middle of the night. Second drone or second whatever this is. Boom, big explosion. Oh my goodness, look at that thing. Lit up like a Christmas tree. Now it's on fire. Looks like it blew up again maybe. And then boom, that's it. That's the video. So the Trump administration released this video and was saying, oh, we blew up a boat. The boat was occupied by 11 Tren Aragua narco-terrorists, and it's a good thing. We blew them up. Actually, Donald Trump, I want to read this because I didn't realize this the first time I read this, but this is hilarious. So Donald Trump, check this out. This is a post on Truth Social. Okay, go away. From Donald J. Trump. Earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positive identified Tren Aragua narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. Blah, 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 blah. They've been designated a foreign terrorist thing. The strike occurred while they were at sea in international waters transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed. Please let this serve as a notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States. Beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Exclamation points out to yin yang. So I saw this. I didn't realize it. Someone pointed this out. There's a lot of exclamation points here. And I didn't realize this at first, but there are actually 11 exclamation points here. This is not an accident. So that's 11. They're like ticks of their kill markers. That's 11 kills, 11 exclamation points. Donald Trump's very happy with this. So people are upset. They're saying, hey, this is not appropriate. We shouldn't be using the military. I have to ask you a question, though. What should we use? Should it be the DEA? Is it the DEA that should be combating the cartel? Is it the FBI? Is it the CIA? Who are we using? What do we use? Is it the Southern Border agents, the Border Patrol? Who fights the cartel? You answer that question to me. If it's not the military, the cartel is, in effect, they run other countries. They run Mexico. They run Colombia. They run these countries that they are based in. They're not the government, but they are the de facto government. They are the people in charge. The Mexican government doesn't go after the cartel. The Mexican government is owned by the cartel in large part. A lot of the police, a lot of the military, these people work for the cartel. You have to. I don't blame them. I'm not blaming the Mexican government for the way it is. The cartel is more powerful than the government of Mexico. What are they going to do? So is this a good thing? Yes, I think it is. I think this sends a message to the cartel. Hey, you want to play with American lives. You are putting your lives at risk. We're going to blow you up. And I think it's good. I think it's fine. I do not see a moral qualm about this. I do not see a constitutional problem with this. I think that the American president has the ability to combat terrorist organizations. And if you're arguing, as I would, that the cartel is responsible for hundreds of thousands of American deaths, I don't know how they're not a terrorist organization. You can treat them like the mafia. The mafia, in all of its history, combined, every mafia member, every organized crime member in America combined has not killed 100,000 Americans in the entire history of the country. You can't argue that. There might be a couple thousand people who were killed, mostly other criminals, by organized crime in America, but 100,000 Americans a year from drug overdoses. So you can't argue. And in our entire time in the Middle East, I think we lost 5,000 American soldiers. My number could be off here, but it's not. Every one of them is bad, obviously, but it's not 100,000. We didn't lose 100,000 people fighting the war on terror. And so I don't know how you get to this spot where you're saying it's a bad thing. Because if you're looking at a principled stance, oh my gosh, the American president can't just designate someone a terrorist organization. The American president can't just use the military willy-nilly, blah, 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 whatever it is, whatever principle it is you're standing by. If your principle is allowing Americans to die, what good is your principle? What purpose does it serve for you to stand by this principle and let people die? I don't see the purpose of it. I think this is a good thing, and I am all for it. This comes on the heels, by the way, of Donald Trump. He deployed 3 guided missiles, destroyers, and 4,000 Marines to the coast of Venezuela because he's saying, hey, Maduro here, the quote-unquote president of Venezuela, is actually just the head of a cartel. That's what he is. And there's actually a $50 million bounty for Nicolas Maduro right now. I'm all for this. This is how we fight. This is not street crime. The cartel is well-funded. This is how we fight them. We're going to fight them with the military. Our military is bigger than them. Our police force in America is not equipped to fight a war against the cartel. Our military is. Our military could do it if we allowed them to. And I see no problem with it. I don't understand the argument against it, why people think this is a bad thing. But people are upset about it, and they're entitled to their opinion. I really don't understand it very well. Anyway, we're going to get on here. Topic 2, Bari Weiss to CBS. If you don't know who Bari Weiss is, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. So she is I call her liberal journalist who really in the past 5 or 6 years got fairly famous for going against the orthodoxy of progressives. So by all accounts, if you look at her, just off her demographics, she is a liberal white woman, lesbian. I believe she's married to a woman. I could be wrong about that, but I think that she's married to a woman. But she is exactly the kind of person that you would expect to just go along with all the progressive ideology. And she doesn't. And because of this, she gets the weirdest amount of hate online that you can see. It's very strange how much the left hates Bari Weiss. But Bari Weiss, she started speaking out about the trans ideology. She's talked about race in America. She's very pro-Israel, which is a big no-no on the left these days. And because of this, she has been shunned from polite society. People do not like Bari Weiss. So a couple years ago, I think 2020 or 2022, somewhere around there, she was hired to the New York Times, and she was going to be the quote-unquote, they're not calling her the conservative on panel, but she was supposed to bring a diversity to the New York Times of opinion. And the New York Times staff bullied Bari Weiss so bad that she had to quit. They basically said they would go on the newspaper-wide Slack channels and badmouth her. They would shun people who were friendly to her. The newspaper editors, they were protesting her hiring. It was a big deal. And she resigned. And she wrote, if you haven't read it, she wrote a scathing resignation letter about the New York Times. It's only about a page long. It is an easy read. You should go read it. If you haven't checked it out, Bari Weiss's resignation letter from the New York Times. I pulled this one thing out because this is what she was saying about the New York Times. She said, quote, "Twitter is not the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. As the ethics and mores of the platform have become those of the paper itself has increasingly become a kind of performance space," end quote. So she was talking about the fact that the New York Times just mimics the worst of the left wing on Twitter. And this is where you get people like that Apoorva, whatever her name is, the COVID person who was saying it was racist to talk about the lab leak origin. This is where you get that. That comes from Twitter. But that also reflects the New York Times. That person works for the New York Times. She was the COVID editor for the New York Times. And this is what Bari Weiss was talking about. Just the worst, dumbest people you see on Twitter are the people that the New York Times caters to. This is how you wind up with the 1619 Project and talking about race in America and St. George Floyd and all this nonsense. So Bari Weiss is ousted from the New York Times as again, I think it's silly to have to point this out, as a white lesbian liberal. She is too far to the right for the New York Times. And so she started this organization called the Free Press. It's a blog, it's a podcast, it is a platform for other creators. So she has a bunch of people who come write articles for them. They call it a conservative website. It is not a conservative website. Bari Weiss is not a conservative. Not in any shape is she a conservative. But they call it a conservative website. Well, this week, the new CEO of Paramount, this guy got the job about a month ago. The CEO named, David Ellison, said he plans to buy the Free Press, which is that blog and podcast from Bari Weiss, upwards of $100 million, by the way. He wants to buy the platform, and he wants to make Bari Weiss the top editor of CBS News, which is under the umbrella of Paramount. So this is a crazy, crazy reaction online to this. I want to read a couple of headlines. The Nation, that garbage website, posted this headline titled, quote, "Vile grifters are taking over establishment media," end quote. The HuffPost had one that said, "Polarizing editor of the Free Press," and it went on to say, "offers a preview of how Ellison, the son of a Trump ally, intends to shape CBS News." Salon put one up that said, quote, "The polarizing editor and founder of conservative outlet, the Free Press." Again, the Free Press, not a conservative outlet. They have some conservatives write opinions. Oh my God. Can you imagine a conservative being able to write an opinion in a magazine? It must make it a conservative magazine. Hey, the New York Times, remember when Tom Cotton had an op-ed in the New York Times? That must be a conservative magazine or a conservative newspaper. It shouldn't be. I mean, they would let Tom Cotton write an op-ed over there. No, it's silly. She's not a conservative. The Free Press is not a conservative website. It is supposed to be a centrist website or a more centrist website, but it's not. I mean, she's still a liberal, people. I don't know what to tell you. It's not like she's going to come out one day and be like, I've been rethinking this gay marriage thing. I don't think she's going to do that. So she's not a conservative, not in any stretch of the imagination. But that's a slur for Salon, the conservative outlet, the Free Press. And then this one's a great one. This is from Jack. No, wait. This is Jack Merkinson, I believe, who wrote this. I could have that wrong, actually. It was from The Nation. I think this was The Nation editor who said, quote, "If we lived in a less terrible time and place, Weiss would be dismissed as a crank and a bigot and never heard from again. But we live in a waking nightmare that is the United States in 2025. So instead, Weiss is being rewarded with a prize that even she must think is kind of wild. The prize, CBS News." That guy's the editor of a fairly popular online publication called The Nation. It's just ridiculous. I mean, talk about an overreaction, right? Like if you think about this and you think, oh my gosh, this person who disagrees with me. I got to make sure about this really quick. Yeah, okay, so it's from The Nation. Okay. If you think about this for just a second, if you're losing Bari Weiss, or you've lost Bari Weiss is too far to the right for you. You're a crazy person. I don't know what to tell you. You are a crazy person. If you think that Bari Weiss is a Nazi or a bigot or a vile person, then you're the crazy one in this situation. Bari Weiss is, she's to the left of the center. She might be towards the center, but she's to the left of the center. I'm sure I would disagree with her about 50 to 70 to 80% of all the issues. We'd probably quibble over some things. She's not on my side, right? Like I think of myself, if we're talking about political alignment here at this point today, 2025, I am probably to the right of center, but I would just barely, not really. I'm to the right at this point, but I'm not, I don't know. I'm not very, very far right. I'm not an extremist. I'm not a theocrat. I'm not one of, I'm not all these things. I'm just to the right on most of my opinions. But I used to be to the left. Really, I used to be to the far left. Then I was kind of to the left, and they lost me a little bit. And then I kind of moved to the right. And now I'm just sort of firmly center right. Bari Weiss is center left. Her and I have a lot in common, but we still wouldn't agree on a lot of policy. But if she's too far to the right, then you're the one who's run off the dock on the left side. It's not Bari Weiss who's the problem here. I look at Bari Weiss as a barometer. How you think of Bari Weiss tells me how stable you are as a person. If you think Bari Weiss is the worst thing that ever happened, I look at you and I say, oh, you must just be a crazy person. That's what you are. You're just a crazy person because Bari Weiss is a very normal human being. She's not, there's nothing crazy about her. If you don't know anything about her, just take my word for it here. There's nothing crazy about Bari Weiss. She's a very nice person. I've listened to her speak a lot. She's been on shows I listen to. I've read some of her stuff. I haven't read her book, but I listened to her a lot on this last book tour. She wrote a pro-Israel book. Again, oh my God, how terrible that she would be pro-Israel as a Jewish person. How terrible that she would come out and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill all the Jews. I know, I get it. It's hard for you on the left to accept that, but it is wild to me how when you lose these people, when you lose me, when you lose Bari Weiss, when you're calling us names, when you think that we're the worst thing in the world, these people who are generally in the center, I think you're just destined to lose every election ever because you have lost the American people, because I think people are closer to Bari Weiss and myself than anyone in the news media, anyone in the corporate press. I think they've lost touch with the American people. This is how they couldn't fathom that Donald Trump would win an election. They don't understand it. They say, oh, I don't, but look at him. He's the worst thing that ever happened. He's Hitler in 2025, and I can't believe people don't see it. And you go, yeah, but he's not. Like, you don't like him. All right, that's fine. But doesn't make him Hitler. And regular people look at him and go, hey, he's kind of kooky. He's goofy. He does things that I wouldn't necessarily do or says things I wouldn't necessarily say, but he kind of governs like a regular Republican, except better. And they don't understand it. They don't see how how do you not see through him? How do you not? I'm so smart. I work for the New York Times. I'm so smart. Don't you see? Donald Trump is just a dummy. I understand that he won the hardest election in the world to win 2 separate times and that he's done more in his life than I could ever do in 15 lifetimes. But he's just so dumb, and how do the regular people not see it? Because you're dumb. Because you think that you're so smart that it actually makes you stupid. That you think that you're so much better than regular people who sit in the center, that you think you just know better. And that actually makes you stupid. When you can't see other people's opinions, when you don't understand regular people because you think of yourself in a different light, then you're actually the one who is behind everybody else because you think of yourself as ahead. You're so far ahead, you're getting lapped in 2 elections, and you don't see the problem is you. The problem is you because you think Bari Weiss couldn't work at your organization, the New York Times, because she's such a bad person. And everyone else in the world looks at Bari Weiss and they say, she seems like a regular person that I could get along with. And when you're calling her the problem, we look at you and say, what's wrong with you? But they don't see this. They're blind. Anyway, it's insanity. It doesn't make any sense to me. When she's a Nazi, everyone's a Nazi. When Bari Weiss, the liberal lesbian from New York, the liberal, whatever, Jewish lesbian from New York, when she's too conservative for you, when she's a Nazi, everyone's a Nazi. And when everyone's a Nazi, you're the fool. You're the one who just has made that word meaningless. It means nothing when you're when you're using it about people like Bari Weiss. Okay, but anyway, I wish her luck. I hope that this goes through, because bringing the corporate press back to the center would be good for America. I don't want the corporate press to just burn down and fall away. I think that organizations like CBS, NBC, the New York Times, all these things, they serve a purpose. I have no problem with them existing and wanting to give a slanted coverage of the news. My problem is when they consider themselves the paper of record and they don't even understand that that's how bad they are. When they don't understand that slanting the news alienates your audience and it makes you less honest. So if she can get in there and make CBS a more honest outlet, I wouldn't care if it leaned left. I just would care that they're honest, or maybe that they aren't afraid to have conservatives on there to have a debate. One of the reasons I like a show like Real Time with Bill Maher, it's not because I agree with Bill Maher on everything. I used to agree with him on most things, and I agree with him less now, especially his views on Donald Trump. But what I like about Bill Maher is that he routinely has conservatives on the panel. He tries to do it often where he has a liberal and a conservative. He's had anyone you can think of on the conservative aisle. He's had them on that show. And he's not afraid to interview them and ask them tough questions and have them on the panel and debate with them and let them speak. And I like that in a television show. That's a good thing. And we need more of that. And so if CBS can get a little dose of that because of Bari Weiss, I wish them luck. We'll see. Anyway, let's move on here. Topic 3, Malcolm Gladwell transitions his opinion. I really like that title. I'm just going to be honest with you. I like the title for topic 3. It makes me laugh. Anyway, if you don't know who Malcolm Gladwell is, that's fine. Malcolm Gladwell is one of these guys. He's a very famous author. He's written some good books. I've never read any of his books, so I can't say that they're good, but I know that they sell well, so I assume there's something to them. But he's written a couple books, Outliers, A Tipping Point. I think those are his big ones. He's written 7 or 8 books. He's a very famous guy. He's been on the Times list for the most influential people in the world, and he's kind of a guy. He's not a conservative. He's like Bari Weiss. He's not a conservative. He's a liberal. But he's kind of towards the center. He says some things that goes against the orthodoxy of liberalism. He's a little heterodox in some of his thinking. So he's one of those guys that conservatives look at sometimes. They say, all right, well, at least he's trying. He went around the internet this week for this clip, which I'm going to play, and then we're going to talk about it. So this is Malcolm Gladwell. He's got this crazy hair. I don't know. But here he is. Listen to what he has to say.
Did a replay of that exact panel at the Sloan Conference this coming March. It runs in exactly the opposite direction. And it would be, I suspect, near unanimity in the room that trans athletes have no place in the female category. I don't think there's any question. I just think it was a strange, the reason I'm ashamed of my performance at that panel because I share your position 100%, and I was cowed. The idea of saying anything on this issue, I was I believe in retrospect, in a dishonest way. I was objective in a dishonest way.
Okay, so that is Malcolm Gladwell. He's got some crazy hair, that guy. You think when you're that famous, you could get a better haircut, but that's okay. So what he's referring to here, in 2022, he was sitting on this panel. There were 4 people on the panel. They were talking about sports. They were talking about trans athletes in sports. And they were saying, basically, yeah, that's fine. Trans athletes are going to compete with women. They're going to win. You can let them win. It's fine. It'll be good, blah, 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 blah. He said nothing. And he's saying now, today, hey, I would reverse that opinion. I don't think it would go the same way. I was basically cowed into saying nothing because I was afraid. He was afraid of being canceled or being labeled transphobic or whatever the case may be, but he was afraid. And he admits that, and he said, I wouldn't do that today. Well, let me just say this. Obviously, I've been saying this from the beginning. It is obvious to anyone with eyeballs that it is unfair for people who were men, who want to call themselves women, to compete with girls in sports. Obviously unfair. Nothing hateful about that. Nothing anti-trans about that. If you want to pretend that biology isn't a thing, that you can't look at this and say, this is so unfair. Look at this. It's crazy to me that we're allowing this to happen. If you can't look at this issue and say that, you're not an honest person, or you have been so brainwashed that you can't see past it. I have no problem the other way, by the way. If a girl wants to compete with the boys, have at it. That's fine. There is no advantage there in my mind that means that you shouldn't allow that to happen. But when the men do it to the women, they win. They win a lot. And you can look online for running counters of this. You can find at this point thousands of opportunities that have been taken away from women and girls because of this issue. And you're not just talking about $4 medals. You're talking about scholarship opportunities. You're talking about national championships. You're talking about things that a woman worked her entire life for and then gets taken away from her. It's not okay. It's not okay, and it's always been unfair, and it always was unfair, and anyone with common sense and a sense of honesty can say that. Malcolm Gladwell couldn't. Malcolm Gladwell is obviously a smart guy. He's written a lot of good books, or a lot of important books, I should say, and he's obviously smart. When you listen to him speak, I've heard him on different things. Again, Real Time with Bill Maher. He's been on that. I've heard him speak. He's a smart guy. He's been on Ben Shapiro's show. So he's a guy who can have conversations with conservatives and liberals. And he's saying that I got this wrong. This is obviously unfair, and I wouldn't do that today. What do we learn from this? One is that liberals, you're looking at these people right now who defend policies that you're saying as a conservative are crazy. And you're saying, you have to know that's crazy. And he's saying, yeah, we know. We know that it's crazy, but we're afraid of our own base, of our own side, and how they'll react. And this is something that you have to get over. Because it was weird for me, I'll be honest. I wrote a couple articles for the Post-Dispatch about shootings that happened here in St. Louis. This is 10, 15 years ago. And the first things I really had in the newspaper that were quote-unquote controversial, where I was talking about this shooting that happened of a guy, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Anthony Smith, maybe. But the police officer's name was Jason Stockley. And I wrote about this. Jason Stockley shot this guy after there was a chase. They thought he was dealing drugs. There was a car chase, the car crashed. There was a wrestle over a gun in the front seat of the car, and then Jason Stockley pulled his gun out and shot this guy. Killed him. And I wrote about this for the newspaper because he went to trial, and he was acquitted, and there were some protests. And I said, hey, guys, don't make this guy the hero. This is the problem. I'm all for it. Hey, when the police shoot people and it's bad, we should send them to jail. Okay, I agree. This is not that case. We're talking about a drug dealer who had a gun, who wasn't supposed to have a gun in the first place because he was already convicted of crimes, and tried to pull a gun on police, ran from the police, put people in danger, and then got killed. And why are we trying to make him a hero or a martyr? And people online were saying that it was bigoted, or I was a racist, or obviously it was terrible, that I would agree with this, and I'm a bad person. And I remember the first time I go, that's kind of crazy. Like I've been a progressive my whole life, and all of a sudden I'm being attacked as a bigot. Like I don't like black people. I'm like, this is crazy, people. Why would you do this? And it's weird with the first time this happens, but you have to get over it. You have to realize, oh, these people can't hurt me. They're not based in reality. You got to know yourself. Hey, I'm not transphobic. I'm not bigoted. I'm not a racist. I know these things, and they're not going to say that about it, hurt my feelings, or make me feel bad. And Malcolm Gladwell is he's voicing a real concern, which is that people are afraid of this. You don't want to be called a racist. Being called a racist if you know you're not a racist, is a bad thing. Being called transphobic, it can be harmful to your career. It can hurt, and it can hurt your feelings, as though you're doing something wrong by calling out something being unfair. And so he's saying the quiet part out loud, which is that he's afraid of the left because the left likes to call people names. And it's bad. It's a bad thing. But what do we do? What do we do with people like Malcolm Gladwell who are dishonest, but then come around and say, you know what, I was being dishonest. I didn't say anything necessarily that was dishonest, but even being quiet, I was being dishonest, or I should have objected, and I should have been braver. I was a little bit of a coward, which is what he's saying. What do we do with people like this? I have a radical idea, which is that we should forgive them. You should say, hey, thank you for admitting that, and try moving forward not to do that. But thank you for being honest. Admitting you're wrong, admitting that you were afraid, admitting this, that's enough for me. I think good for him. Good for him for owning it. Good for him for acknowledging the reality on the ground. And that's where we have to leave it. We can't just hold people accountable forever. Now, we can if they don't apologize for their actions. Remember a couple years ago at this point, where I ripped an article online where it was talking about COVID amnesty. This lady wrote an article where she said, oh my God, hey, remember COVID? We were all a little crazy, weren't we? And maybe we should just forget about it. And I said, hold on. No, we weren't. I wasn't crazy. A lot of people I knew weren't crazy. You guys were crazy. Don't say we were all crazy. Let's just forget about it. Say, hey, here's where I messed up. X, Y, Z. I'm sorry. Then I'm happy to forgive you. But don't just say, oh my gosh, remember that time? It's so hazy, all right? Like, I can barely remember who did what. I remember when Joe Biden signed an executive order to try and get me fired from my job if I didn't want to get the COVID vaccine. I remember when Democrats supported that. I remember when they shut down the schools. I remember all of these things that I said at the time, don't do this. And so you can hold them accountable if they don't apologize. If you want to apologize, if you want to say, hey, I was wrong, then forgiveness is your friend. And I think we should forgive people like Malcolm Gladwell who want to own this, who want to do the mea culpa, who want to say, I apologize, I was sorry, or, I shouldn't have done this, I was wrong. They don't have to necessarily say I'm sorry, but say I was wrong and I shouldn't have done this, or I would have done it differently. That's fine. Forgive those people. But when you don't, we don't. You don't want to take ownership of your failures or your shortcomings, then we're not going to forgive you. And I think that's fine too. Anyway, I think that's all I want to say about this topic for the week. As always, people, questions, comments, concerns down below. Oh, one thing. I'm going to post a link here. I'm going to put these videos up, and I'm going to post a link below the video on Facebook. I'm doing a stair climb. I'll probably post it separately, but I'm doing a stair climb for charity every year on 9/11, or actually the Sunday before 9/11. We do a memorial stair climb to raise money for some firefighter organizations. So we're raising money for the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation, where we put our gear on. We're doing 110 stories, and it's for a good cause. It's for charity, and it's always a nice event. So I'm going to post some info. I'll post a little fundraiser thing below here. If you want to donate, I would appreciate it. I'll give everyone who donates a shout out on next week's podcast. So if you want to donate, I would appreciate it. And any little bit of money helps, and it all goes to a good cause. None of it's going to anything that has to do with me. It all goes to charity. So if you want to donate, I'm going to post a link to that later, and you'll get a shout out on the top of next week's episode. Little incentive right there for all you good people out there. So just going to throw that out there. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. As always, hope you guys have a great one, and I will catch you next Friday.